Hello and welcome back. For our next chapter, we're going to be covering the senses. Today, we are going to focus on distinguishing between general senses and special senses. We're going to name 5 kinds of receptors and explain their functions. We're going to describe the receptors associated with the senses of touch, pressure, temperature, and pain. And we're going to describe how the sense of pain is produced. Sensory perception is how your brain interprets what the senses take in. There are some disorders associated with this. Synesthesia is one where the perception goes into your brain and basically gets intertwined with another pathway and kind of crosses over. It can lead to things like being able to taste colors or to see music. Ideesthesia is one that has been more specifically named, and it's letters and numbers evoke colors. So there are people who literally can see your name, and for them, it's not really necessarily the letters, it's a color. Your name is a color. For example, here you have 7 is yellow and 9 is blue. So 5 plus 2 is yellow. Then 5 plus 2 equals yellow. 6 plus 3 equals blue. So the pathways, the sensory pathways kind of get crossed, and it leads to a non-typical feeling or perception of reality. The two main types of senses, you have general senses and special senses. General senses are going to be those receptors found throughout your body, including your joints and your organs. Special senses are the specialized receptors found in your head, your eyes, ears, and mouth. Sensation and receptors. So, sensation is a feeling that occurs when the brain interprets a sensory nerve impulse. So, it receives a stimuli, and the sensation is the feeling that occurs because of that. Projection is when the brain causes a feeling to stem from a source. And then sensory adaptation is when sensory receptors stop sending signals when they are repeatedly stimulated. So, sensory adaptation would be, for instance, feeling the weight of your clothes. Until I mentioned that, you probably didn't even realize it, but you can feel your clothes on you now. Before, you really didn't. And now you're like, oh yeah, I can feel the weight of my shirt or my jeans or whatever you're wearing. In the picture on this slide, you see a woman laying in a tank. What do you think is going on? I mean, she's just laying there floating. It's what is known as sensory deprivation. When you deprive somebody of something, you take it away from them. They don't have that input anymore. So a sensory deprivation is a technique that was initially used by neuropsychiatrists, and it was designed to deliberately reduce or completely remove stimuli from one or all the senses. So basically, when people are getting too much stimuli from the outside, a sensory deprivation tank like this, basically they just lay there, they float, and typically it's a very dense salt water that allows the body to float. So all of the sensation, it's warm, it's roughly your body temperature. A lot of times there will be no lights. And basically your body just kind of doesn't react to anything because it's not getting any input stimulus. And so it allows the body to kind of calm down a little bit. Now, some people have opposite effects due to this, but it is a therapy that has worked for several people. And it is becoming more and more mainstream, where they have things like sensory deprivation tanks at spas or things like that. So, The receptor cells in your PNS, your peripheral nervous system, are activated by the stimuli in the environment. So this could be noises, this could be temperature, it could be almost anything. The receptor cells themselves can be classified into types based on 3 different criteria: the cell type, the position, and their function. So the structure types, you have 3. You have free nerve endings. The dendrites are embedded in the tissue as receivers. They respond to pain and temperature. So here we have our nerve endings, your cell body, and your axon. Next, you can have encapsulated. These are embedded in connective tissue to increase sensitivity. These are going to be more associated with pressure and touch. So encapsulated just means the dendrites are covered. And then you can have specialized receptors in the retina of the eye. These ones obviously help with sight. You have location-based receptor types. You have exteroreceptors located near the external environment or on your skin. You have interoreceptors, which interpret stimuli from internal organs, so your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, your bladder, things like that. And then proprioceptors, located near moving body parts, and these interpret position. So if you close your eyes and someone were to take your hand and put it above your head, you would know your hand is above your head. And that would be proprioceptors letting you know that. It's basically kind of the spatial awareness of where your body parts are. And then you have functional receptor types. So a chemoreceptor, chemochemicals, these are going to be found mostly in your nose and mouth. Osmoreceptors respond to solutes in body fluids. Osmo kind of related to osmosis. Thermoreceptors, thermo, temperature. Mechanoreceptors, pressure, vibration, and body position. And nociceptors, which are related to pain and chemicals released when the tissue is damaged. So pain. What is pain? There's different types. Visceral pain occurs in visceral tissues such as your heart, lungs, and intestines. Referred pain, it feels as though it's coming from a different part. So when someone has a heart attack, they get pain in their shoulder for guys a lot of times, or for women, it's more up into the jaw. So that would be referred pain. It's somewhere you're feeling pain, but not where it actually is. Acute pain originates from the skin, usually stops when the stimulus stops, so getting a needle prick, a paper cut, something like that. And then chronic pain is a dull, aching sensation, and this is obviously chronic, it's continual. This would be more similar to like cramps or something like that, which do typically go away, but sometimes people are in constant pain due to some sort of chronic pain caused by different things like rheumatoid arthritis or something like that. So there is a universal pain assessment tool. They ask you about this when you go to the hospital. It's intended to help patient care providers assess pain according to individual patient needs. It uses a 0 to 10 scale for self-assessment. You have the faces for people who maybe can't talk or communicate with their pain. They can just like point. So a 0 to 1 is pretty much no pain. A 2 would be very mild pain. You can ignore it, not really any problem. Moderate pain is when you're starting to feel it. It interferes with your life a little bit. This is where you may hold your breath, you may like furrow your brow, you may like pinch your lips together, things like that. Moderate pain is where it's going to interfere with your concentration. You can't really focus on anything. This is going to be your 5 to 7 range. 7 to 9 is going to be severe pain. It interferes with your basic needs like being able to sleep or use the bathroom, things like that. And then a 9 to 10 is going to be your worst pain possible. This is typically where you can't do anything. So remember, if you do have to go to the hospital for something and they ask you where your pain is, don't try to underestimate it, but don't also say it's a 10 when you're really feeling more of like a 5 or a 4. So just remember to use the correct interpretation that's correct for you. And doctors obviously have this, they can somewhat tell by how you act where you are on a pain scale, but some people are obviously better at hiding pain than others. So just remember, anytime you go to a doctor, be honest with your symptoms, what you're feeling, so that way they can actually help you. So the universal pain assessment tool. So think back to that. Think about where you would put each of these events. So if you stubbed your toe, where would you put it? Where would you put a burn from a stove? That one would also depend on how severe and where the burn is. I mean, if you barely bump the side of your hand to a warm stove and you run under cold water and you're fine, it's not pretty bad. But if you, for instance, trip or something, or when you're reaching in to grab a pan out of an oven and you hit your arm onto the top of the oven and burn off a huge chunk of skin, that would be a lot different than, bumping into it. Where do you think slamming your finger in a door would be? A paper cut, sprained ankle, sore throat, migraine. So it depends on the individual where all of these would be placed. So think about where you are and think about where some of these might be placed for you. So how do you measure pain in babies or young children who really can't talk? So they have different criteria and they score them. So they look at the face. Is there no particular expression or are they smiling? Then you wouldn't have really a score there. If they occasionally grimace, frown, or withdrawn or uninterested, would be a 1, and then frequent, a constant quivering chin, or a clenched jaw would be a 2. Their legs, are their legs just laying there kind of flat and relaxed? Or are they tensing up a little bit, they're uneasy, restless, or are they kicking or have their legs curled up to them? Activity, are they just lying there quietly, normal, moving around? Or if they're squirming, shifting back and forth, are they more tense? Or if they're arched, rigid, or jerking? So looking at all these, it's pretty interesting how doctors are able to help every individual, even if they can't talk themselves. So are they crying? Are they just occasionally like moaning or whimpering? Or are they just like screaming in pain? And then consolability. This would definitely, I mean, for babies and young children, they're content to relax, especially if they're just whining or crying and then you pick them up and hold them and they're fine. This goes back to when you're little and you trip and fall and you're crying and you want your parent to kiss your boo boo and then it's all better. So that would definitely be the consolability. If they're able to have their boo boo kissed and be fine, then obviously they're not really in that much pain. If they are able to be distracted, and that sometimes there is some more damage there that obviously needs a little bit more help, but if they're able to be distracted by something like that, then they really aren't hurt as bad. And then if that doesn't work and they're still in pain after trying to talk, trying to help them, trying to console them, trying to make them feel better, then there's probably something else going on. So, leading on from pain into how people deal with pain. And this leads into the continued increase in abuse of prescription drugs like opioids. 2.6 million people nationwide, and obviously this is a few years old now, use prescription pain pills for recreational purposes. When pain pills are taken in small doses, they can provide very good feelings for the body with no hangover. But that's not a good thing. Over time, as somebody takes these pills, they can build up a tolerance to these pills. And they need to take more and more or stronger pills, which is where you end up leading from pain pills into possibly heroin or other more dangerous substances, where the person can overdose and end up dying. So how do they actually work to block pain and why they become less effective as you use them? This relates back to the nerves. The nerve sends a signal, and the opioids slow or block that signal. And so if you're experiencing some sort of pain and you're able to block it out, why not? It would make you feel better, but that's not a good thing. Now, severe pain or things like that, like if you've had a major surgery or severe injury from something like a car accident, a temporary use of a painkiller of some sort is not a bad thing. The problem comes when people are unable to stop using them. So make sure if you ever have to use some sort of strong painkiller that you are very careful, and as soon as you don't need them, don't take them. When I had my wisdom teeth out, they gave me a prescription for a painkiller. I think I took it one time and then I switched to um, ibuprofen, which worked fine for what I was going through. Some people need them longer, some people don't need them at all. But if you can avoid opioids or painkillers that are like opioids, you're going to be better off. These opioids help to stimulate the limbic system and our reward pathway, which means they make you feel good so you want to do it more. So it's just a memory, it's just making sure that you don't use them too much if you have to use them for some purpose. So as we know, this is becoming more and more of a problem. So what is the responsibility of the government with regard to the drug use and overdose? Who's to blame? And who needs to take control of the situation? And that's where the question lies. You can see on this map where some of the strongest uses of drugs are. You can tell out here in the southwest, there's quite a bit, and over here in the Appalachian region. But right here in Missouri, we do have a rather high rate of drug overdoses. And one other thing you will notice, there is definitely a correlation between how many opioid pain relievers are sold and the rate of overdose. The states that are higher typically sell more pain relievers. One thing you will notice, most of the states that don't have as many issues have that very small rate of opioid pain relievers. So if people don't have access to them, it's harder to become addicted, abuse them, and overdose. So that's obviously one of the easiest strategies. If prescribers don't prescribe them, doctors don't prescribe them, then you don't have to worry about as many people getting their hands on them or having problems. The opioid crisis began because opioid-based painkillers were brought about as a alternative to the more addicting painkillers that were on the market at the time. And because of the now known to be false advertising of this, it became a major problem. And several individuals have since sued drug manufacturing companies for pushing these drugs knowing that they would have a very negative side effect on populations. They're basically suing them for negligence and for lying about what their product actually did. And at this point, these opioid pain relievers, they're trying to save them for people who are in the worst pain. So people who are on hospice care, who are cancer patients who are in extreme pain from their cancer and with no chance of survival. That's who these prescriptions are trying to be used more for rather than just somebody who broke their leg. So thankfully now that this has been recognized, doctors are doing their best to stop prescribing these. But when somebody is addicted to something, they really try to make sure they're able to get their fix in any way possible. So that is where they turn to heroin and things like that. So once again, I just want you to think of who is responsible, how should the government react to this, and then what are some strategies you think that you can do to reduce the number of these overdose deaths. Moving on from general senses to special senses. We're going to talk about hearing and sight separately, but we are going to talk about your olfactory and your gustatory senses right now. So olfactory is going to be your sense of smell, and gustatory is going to be your sense of taste. Hearing, obviously, hearing and equilibrium is balance, and then sight obviously goes with vision. So the sense of smell. You have an odor. There are receptor cells in your nose. It goes to your olfactory bulb and through the olfactory tract to your limbic system connected in your brain. And they can be associated with a lot of different things, such as memories. Sometimes you'll walk in somewhere and you'll smell something and it'll trigger a memory of something else. Because it is tied into the limbic system that also deals with the memories. That is why it will sometimes trigger memories. Then you have gustatory, which is taste. On your tongue, you can see here all the little bumps. Those are papillae, or your taste buds. Now, taste buds are not arranged in like you have a spot for sweet on the tip of your tongue and salty on the sides of your tongues and bitter in the back of your tongue. No, they're just spread out evenly all over. That idea has been shown to be false. So what are some different tastes? Sweet, we obviously know what sweet is, sour, bitter, salty, and then savory or umami. So think of some of these tastes and where they would fall. So where would strawberries fall in your head? Depending on the strawberry, it's probably either going to be sweet or sour. Cheetos, probably salty. French fries, probably salty or savory. Chocolate, depending on the type of chocolate, it could be bitter or sweet. So umami is probably the one you haven't really heard of. It's a savory taste. It's one of the 5 basic tastes together with the sweet, sour, bitter, and salty. We actually pull the word umami from the Japanese, and it can be translated to a pleasant, savory taste. So a good example of umami is a bacon cheddar cheeseburger. The bacon, the cheddar, and the beef all have those savory tastes together. If you add in some other things, umami can alter our taste perceptions, making other things taste either saltier, sweeter, more bitter, or less sour tasting. You can't really duplicate umami with the other four tastes. Now, do we all experience taste the same way? No. Think about it. Not everybody likes the same foods. Do genetics play a role in this? Yes, it can, very much. So, there are a group of people, I am included in this group, who hate the taste of cilantro. To me, it literally tastes like dish soap. Yet some people absolutely love the taste of cilantro, and love to have it in their food. This is a genetic taste. So if you don't like cilantro, it doesn't matter how often you eat it, it's probably always going to taste like soap, for me at least. And so, no matter what they do, I will never like cilantro. I mean, there are things that where maybe you don't like it when you first try it and you eat more of it and you're able to enjoy it as you go on. So, for instance, a lot of people with vegetables don't like vegetables when they're little, but as they get older, they start to eat them and they're like, hey, these aren't actually too bad. So, that would be one where your taste changes versus cilantro where your taste is kind of stuck and it won't change. So that's one of those. Another example, some people are known as super tasters. There are these little strips you can get where you just put it on your tongue. And some people are like, it's paper, okay, whatever. And then some people, it's literally this horrible bitter taste. And you have the gene that's able to taste that. I am able to. I've met people who aren't. But it's always fun when you have somebody try that because they'll either be like, okay, what was that supposed to do? Or if you have like a group and you have like some of them try it and some of them are just like, whatever, and the other half is like, oh, that's horrible. It's interesting to see how genetics plays a role in that. So there is an assignment on the Google site. Please make sure you go and complete it. If you have questions, please feel free to email me. Your next set of notes and assignment will be posted in a couple of days. Have a great day.